My name is Jeff Wilson. By day, I invest in tech companies, and at night, I invest in sports cards. Join me on my journey to profit from the hobby we all love. Hello, sports card investors, and welcome to another episode. And in today's episode, we are going to be talking about a topic that should, if you use this information right, help you make money in the sports card investments that you are making. Because the topic that we are talking about today is the off-season. The off-season. We're going to talk about baseball's off-season because that's happening right now, but we're also going to talk about basketball's off-season and football's off-season because they're going to be coming up obviously next year. The off-season doesn't sound like a sexy topic, right? Like, why? Who cares about the off-season? The off-season's boring. I want to see the games. I want to see the players. Who cares about the off-season? And that's exactly the point. Most of your casual fans, most of your card collectors, your casual card collectors don't care about the off-season. And that is why, as a savvy investor, the off-season gives you potentially the most opportunity to be making money in whatever sport you are deciding to invest in. In the baseball off-season, which is going on right now, people are not paying attention to the developments that have happened and that are going to happen. Do you know who won MVP in the Arizona Fall League? Do you know who's going to get traded in the upcoming baseball winter meetings? You should. And we're going to talk about those things today because those things can have a significant impact on card prices, but a lot of people aren't paying attention. So if you pay attention to the information that is occurring during the time when everybody is distracted, you're watching football and you're watching basketball and you're not paying attention to what's going on in baseball's offseason. So that means there is opportunity abound, and we're going to get you ready today. We're going to get you ready for that so you understand the landscape of the offseason and how to navigate the offseason in baseball as well as basketball and football to help maximize your investments as a sports card investor. Now, the guy who I'm going to bring on today's show to talk about this is a guy by the name of Joel Ague. Joel wrote a really popular article for my blog, sportscardinvestor.com, last month called Talking About How to Model Superstar Hitters to Determine Their Future Potential. It was an article a lot of people liked and commented on. So Joel proposed this idea of doing an article about how to navigate baseball's off-season for baseball card investment opportunities. And I read the article and I said this would be a great topic for a show. So that's Joel's about to come on the show here in a minute. And we're going to talk to Joel about this topic. And you can also check out his article, which just went live today on sportscardinvestor.com. And while you are there, there is another baseball-related article for you to check out. This one is from Jaron Cox, and he wrote an article about the 3 baseball players he is buying this offseason. So he talks about 3 cards that he's buying and why he's buying them, and he thinks you should be buying those cards as well. So a couple of great articles on sportscardinvestor.com to check out. But now let's get right into the topic at hand, and that is how to navigate the offseason and use the offseason to profit. I'm going to bring in Joel Ague. Here's Joel. Hey, Joel, welcome to the Sports Card Investor. Really happy to have you on the show.
Hey, Jeff, thanks. Glad to be on. Looking forward to our discussion.
Absolutely. So, Joel, tell me a little bit about your background when it comes to sports card collecting and investing.
Right. So I grew up just a massive baseball fan. I grew up in Georgia where baseball is pretty big, just, in the little summer league baseball or just playing as a little leaguer, So basically it was my love of baseball that brought me to cards. And then also my dad's always been someone who likes to just open the packs, open the boxes and all that. And I enjoyed that thrill. So I grew up just, cracking packs and, looking for that shimmer card or the refractor or the autograph of whoever, and so I don't know, I just always thought it was a cool thing to be able to open up a pack and see what you get. And so I've historically been more of just a collector, chasing after certain players, but as as I've gotten older, now I've started a career and stuff. I've thought about things to invest in, and you do the stock market. I know things about businesses and all that, but I know a lot about baseball. So that's what has got me thinking more along the lines of something else, an alternative vehicle for me to invest in other than just like the market or whatever. So.
Yeah, and you have some very savvy thoughts. One of the things that attracted me to bringing you on the show, the last article that you wrote for my blog last month, you wrote a great article called Modeling Superstar Hitters to basically to figure out the future potential of baseball prospects to potentially invest in. And you looked at a bunch of statistical categories. It was some really interesting analysis. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Right. So basically what happened was my dad had all these cards that he had accumulated a big inventory of cards, and he was trying to decide which ones to sell, when, why, who. And so, I mean, I knew certain players, but I kind of wanted to come up with some actual like benchmark to decide which players should actually be sold. And I was like, wait a second, there's superstars that are actively just blowing everybody's minds and having their card values go up and up. Maybe there's something that is similar between all of them. So I picked certain players that I thought had captivated everyone for the past couple of years, like your Mike Trouts, Mookie Betts, etc. And I wanted to dig into the early years, like when they went through the minors, because that's what was going on with these prospects. Is they're currently they're on their journey to the league basically. And so I looked at their minor league years and then their early first couple seasons, and I saw that they did have some similarities. So you can check it out in the article for the results, I guess, of the study, but. And it was cool to be able to like take what I knew about baseball and use it to kind of decide, make decisions on players that had never even played a major league game.
And for those of you out there who are interested in reading more about what Joel actually found, the different statistical categories that he looked at, and some of the players who he thinks could make good investments today based upon what he found, go to sportscardinvestor.com and you can find that article in the archives under the articles section around modeling superstar hitters to determine future potential. But what Joel and I wanted to talk about today was the fact that we have entered baseball's long offseason, and the offseason of any sport, whether it be baseball or basketball or football or hockey or any sport, is often a great time to be buying up cards because card collecting interest and card investing interest tends to wane in the offseason, and you start to see prices often dip or at a minimum at least plateau in the offseason and give you the opportunity to assess the marketplace and make smart investments. But just because the season is not happening doesn't mean that there is no activity in that sport. In fact, there is actually a lot of activity that you should be aware of if you're going to be tracking a sport. And this was the basis of Joel's newest article. You wanted to look at what was happening this baseball offseason and give sports card investors some things to be tracking and some things to be thinking about as they're making their picks of who they might want to be buying this offseason. So let's step through this offseason a little bit, Joel. Tell us, first, I know you started to comment a little bit on the Arizona Fall League was one of the first things you started to talk about in your article. Tell us a little bit more about what's happening with that.
Yeah, so the Arizona Fall League is this cool little league that happens after the conclusion of the minor league season. So the minor league season will wrap up in September, a little bit before September. Then they have the expanded rosters for the MLB, and so the MLB will finish their season, do their playoffs. But while that's all going on, there's the Arizona Fall League that's happening in mid-September through October. So it just concluded, I guess, a couple weeks ago. And basically these teams will bring on some of the minor league prospects. They'll ask the teams, and then they'll send them over. And you got some top guys there. Like I mentioned in the article, the past couple of years, big MVPs in that league have been like Chris Bryant, Nolan Arenado, just big names. And so this year's MVP was Royce Lewis. He's a Twins prospect, so you might want to look at him. Not to who knows, but I mean, there's clearly a trend with MVPs there. So basically, they're generating data points. Like that's the big takeaway here is just throughout the whole offseason, like things are still happening and information is coming out. And information is king when it comes to investing. Like that's why insider trading with the companies and stocks is illegal, because information is very, very important when it comes to investing. And the idea that there's information coming out that people are not paying attention to, because you got college football full swing, college basketball starting up, NBA, there's a lot of other sports happening, and people care about them because they're on their TV. You can just turn on the TV, watch the game. So the Arizona Fall League, you basically have to just go to the games because all the way over there, because it's not going to be on your TV most likely. So basically, you just need to consider the fact that there's information widely available. Like, you can check Twitter, you can follow the games other ways, and see what's happening. Because, for example, the next Buster Posey is Joey Bart, supposedly. He's a Giants prospect, catching prospect. And he fractured his thumb, which might not be a big deal, but that could have affected his value because he could be injury prone. Who knows?
That's a great point, right? As a investor in sports cards, whatever sport you choose to invest in, you've really got to have an understanding of what's happening in that sport at all times. And it's easy to get distracted, especially during the off season, because as you said, people are not paying attention right now to baseball. People are paying attention to football. People are paying attention to basketball. They are not paying attention to baseball, which means if you are paying attention to baseball and you're tuned in to something like the Arizona Fall League, to the point where you may not be able to be tuned into the games themselves, but if you're watching the results and you're looking at the stat sheets and everything like that, you may see things happening before the rest of the baseball card market is really aware of it. And you may be able to pick up cards of certain guys who could really be start to be having a great season in the fall league, and maybe that will translate into major league success next year or in the following years.
You don't have to pay too much attention. You just follow some guy on Twitter that is paying attention and see what they're tweeting about and be like, that guy hit 2 home runs tonight. Cool. Maybe I should look at him. And
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So you have the Arizona Fall League. So as you said, that just wrapped up end of October. When is the next kind of off-season opportunity to maybe check some players out?
Yeah. So another thing that actually just wrapped too, it's a November thing, I guess, it's called the Premier 12, and it's a qualifying for Olympics thing. So maybe it's every 4 years, I guess. But main guys who were playing were Alec Baum, who's a third baseman prospect for the Phillies. You got Joe Adele, who's huge prospect for the Angels. He's been he was one of the guys that was dominating the Arizona Fall League. So there's a bunch of dudes that Andrew Vaughn, he just got drafted by the White Sox. He was there. So guys are still playing baseball. These top dudes that people have had a big eye, they've been very under the microscope for the past 6 months, and then from the end of the minor league season on to that past season, and then all of a sudden people are like, oh yeah, but what about those Lakers, right? Things are happening that they care about more now. So you kind of forget about these guys that are still doing things.
Yeah, but what about those Lakers, right? I mean, that's what, as you said, that's what people are focused on right now. It's really interesting that that tournament's going on. It just wrapped up. Big players, big prospects were in that tournament, and not a whole lot of people were paying attention. Hopefully a lot of the viewers were. But if you weren't and you're investing in baseball cards, you might want to go back and look at the performance of some of the players who were playing in that tournament, because it's just as you just said, it's more data points to look at. The Fall League, though, and the tournament have now wrapped up. we've got baseball's winter meetings coming up soon, though, right? Yeah. So that's another thing that's going to be coming up relatively soon. I think that's happening in early December 8th through 12th, if I recall. Mm-hmm. So tell me a little bit about the winter meetings and what might be of interest there for a baseball card investor.
So yeah, the baseball winter meetings, big time for really all the players. So it's definitely, I guess, more geared towards the major leaguers because there's free agency, that all these guys who just ended their contracts, they were now entered into the free agency. And so you got big free agents like Garrett Cole. Obviously, he just dominated the playoffs. And basically, the exact second the Astros lost the World Series, he was already out of all of his Astros gear. He was like, all right, free agency, bring it on. He was ready. So he might not be going back to the Astros just based off of his demeanor, but he's going to go somewhere, right? So you have to be thinking about the teams that are looking at him, how it's going to affect his value as for cards, and just in general, maybe he goes to a hitter-friendly park. That might not be good. So there are a lot of just things you need to think about with the players who are going to be talked about. They're basically, what I say is their value is going to be in flux because there's a lot of unknown. Steven Strasburg, Anthony Rendon. The minor leaguers are still important too because trades are going to happen. You turn on ESPN and some massive trade happened that you had no idea was even possible, and your minor leaguers that you've thrown thousands of dollars at, getting them graded and oh man, I believe in this guy because he's on the Mets and I love the Mets, and then he's on Baltimore now, or Minnesota.
Hopefully not Baltimore.
Yeah, so it could happen. So you don't know, like your player that you're like, man, this guy's just gonna crush it. Like there's a spot open for him on the Mets. Like he's obviously gonna go and be their next star shortstop. And then no, sorry, he's not on the Mets anymore. So there's a lot of things that, because I mean these GMs aren't thinking about you. Like they're not like, oh man, like if I trade him, I might lose some fans. They're like, no, I want to do what's best for my team. So there's a lot of things, a lot of trades, a lot of players are going to be swapping teams or joining new teams. So.
Yeah, and so that's December 8th through 12th. So be ready for some potential chaos to card prices, to baseball card prices, December 8th through 12th. And you talked, some about the negative of players going to a team that's not a contender. In this basketball offseason, we saw what can happen in the reverse if a player ends up going to a contender, right? I mean, we saw a player like Anthony Davis move from the Pelicans, the New Orleans, a small market, not a contender, move to the Lakers. Ultimate situation for him, paired with LeBron, big market, big contender, chance to win the title this year. His card prices went up 250% overnight. Literally, yeah. The day that was announced, his card prices went up 250%. Kawhi, who was coming off of by far his all-time high card prices, coming off of Toronto, but when it was announced he was going to LA, his cards jumped even further up. I didn't even know it was possible for his cards to go further up because they were so high coming off of his championship with the Raptors this past season. But the news of him going to the Clippers, pairing up with Paul George, going to a major media market, caused his card prices to go higher. So you have the potential, if you can anticipate or have a quick trigger on some of the things that are happening in the winter meetings, you do have the potential to be able to potentially profit from a guy moving, assuming he's moving into a better situation than the situation he's been in.
Yeah, and that's why it's so important. Like I said, information. It's helpful to be one of the first people to see things happen, and a better way to do that is to follow some guys on Twitter, like beat writers or some of the guys who have the inside scoop, because they'll tweet it, and then they'll be the first one to have that scoop. And so if you're following them and refreshing, if something's about to happen, you can figure out that something happened before people see it on SportsCenter, because ESPN is going to be minutes, 30 minutes, an hour behind sometimes of news breaking on like Twitter or something. So it's important to be one of the first people to see the information so that they can, maybe they go hit some buy it nows really quick before anybody else. So
yeah,
a lot of things
absolutely. Absolutely. So winter meetings get over mid-December, and then you've got a gap between that and spring training. Anything happening in that gap to be aware of, or is it truly kind of a quiet time for baseball?
Yeah, so there's still trades to it. So last year, a lot of the action didn't actually happen until later on. So that's one of the things that is kind of concerning about baseball. Like people are like, oh man, the winter meetings, a lot of things are going to happen. But last year was really quiet because there's just contract questions, and I don't really know what was driving a lot of it. I haven't done too much research on it, but basically people were disappointed in what happened with the winter meetings, and players eventually got signed or didn't get signed. Like Kimbrel, he got signed way later, Keuchel and all that. So a lot of players didn't get paid until mid-season. So there's still a lot of unknowns. Maybe things will be different this year, but I mean, yeah, there's still things might still pick up in January or February, and then the minor leaguers will start playing pretty early, I think. I'm not exactly sure on their start time, but they usually have some sort of spring thing going on, and so that's when people kind of come back to baseball, that's the thing, and they'll be like, oh yeah, but these prospects that I care about, I forgot, let's watch them, and then at that point, hopefully you have taken some time to process the information that's happened, or just done historical research, maybe on the past season that people have forgotten about. And you can buy the rumor, you see this person might be good, and then sell the news when in the spring they make the major league team in spring training, because they can get invited to spring training and prove themselves and they can get on the team. And then it's oh, this guy's going to start on the team. And if you had known there's some build up to that, then you could have capitalized on it.
Absolutely.
Than they're on my team now, I'm going to buy them immediately.
Right.
People are very reactionary. You've kind of gone on, and so you got to think about how people are acting, and yeah.
So information is king, and having information before others have it or have noticed it is king. And, the basic conclusion here is this winter off season for baseball gives you the opportunity to get that information that others may not be paying attention to, get it first, process it first, be the first to understand what it means. And whether it's how a player is performing in the fall league or how a player performed in the tournament or how or news that's happening coming out of the winter meeting or post that in regards to a player potentially being moved, et cetera. These are all, as you said, additional data points that can yield to you being the first to know and being able to get in on a player during what is normally a pretty quiet time for buying baseball cards.
Yeah, because things like a player will get traded to another team, and the casual fan might, in April be like, that guy's on that team now? I had no idea.
Right.
People don't pay attention. They're like, oh, I thought Goldschmidt was a Diamondback for life. He's on the Cardinals now? What? I had no idea. That happens because people are so engrossed in what's happening now, the big sport of today.
And by the way, a good time to sell your cards, a pattern that I've seen consistently year over year. Cards are always hot in the couple of weeks leading up to the start of a season and in the first week or two of a season. There's always a bit of a spike across the entire market. If you are able to take advantage of the off-season time and buy up some players, maybe somebody who you're anticipating is going to move to another team, and then you put those for sale, either with auctions ending or buy it nows right around the start of the season, that's a really good potential to maximize the value. And that gives you kind of an opportunity to flip some of these guys in a relatively short period of time. I mean, we're talking about paying attention now, buying up some guys now, paying attention to, anticipating what may be happening this off season, and then selling them right when the new season is getting going.
Yeah, it's basically just taking advantage of the human element of, oh, look, a shiny thing, let's watch that. And they're distracted. They're not thinking about things in like a longer term perspective, right?
Right. So. Absolutely. So, Joel, what are a couple of things this offseason, like specific players, that you are really interested in seeing what happens with? I know you mentioned, like, for example, Cole earlier. Any other guys you're kind of looking at this offseason?
Yeah, well, as a Dodger fan, I just am curious of what they're going to do because, 7 years of postseason, just dramatic losses have been tough.
Dramatic losses. Yep. That's a good way to describe it.
It's been a consistent thing. So, the team has to, I don't know what they have to do. No one knows. So hopefully the team knows because I don't know. But for personal reasons, what the Dodgers are going to do, like always. But I'm curious to see if Cole can carry over his success to another team because, I know the Astros have just this thing about turning pitchers into just beasts. So Cole was a good pitcher before, but he went insane as an Astro. So I'm curious to see what team he goes to and if there's a drop off of some sort.
And I know we've talked a lot here about baseball, and I know baseball is your specialty as a card collector and investor. You mainly concentrate on baseball, which, by the way, for anyone who's investing in cards, having a sport that you go deep in, like where you're really concentrating a lot of your knowledge, that can be a favorable thing because it's hard to have this degree of knowledge that Joel's talking about today. It's hard to have that degree of awareness and knowledge across all the sports. So it's often to better pick a sport that you're really going to try to specialize in as an investor and get that deep knowledge. So we've talked a lot about baseball, Joel, because I know that is your sport where you're really concentrated, but it's worth noting that there's a similar story to what you've talked about here that is going to happen in the NFL and in the NBA. In the NFL, you've got rookie mini camp, you've got various off-season training camps. Of course, you got the NFL draft in the NFL, which is a massive off-season activity, which affects everything, and you get some trades around the draft. In the NBA, you got the summer league, and the summer league has really started to have a pretty significant impact on card prices. We saw it this summer. Guys who were in the summer league, who were getting hot in the summer league, we saw their card prices really bounce around during the summer league. That is an opportunity in the NBA in particular to be tuned in with what is going on and to try to get in on some of the guys who are developing and then may end up being the stars in the following NBA season. So speaking of the basketball offseason and the summer league, one of the big attractions that got so many eyeballs on the summer league this year was Zion, and Zion debuting on the Pelicans during the summer league this year. How is basketball in that sense, and all of the attention that the summer league has been building? How does that compare to baseball?
Well, the path to the pros for NBA players the spotlight is just massive compared to baseball. So Zion's on the Duke Blue Devils, like I said, iconic team. Wander Franco is playing on the Charlotte Stone Crabs right now, or he did at the end of the season. So like, who even is that? Like, I looked it up. It's not even like Charlotte, North Carolina. It's like some Charlotte city in Florida. So it's quite the difference. So
yes, the Charlotte Stone Crabs are not typically not headlining Sports Center at night.
Exactly. So you got Zion in front of millions, carrying his team to the Elite Eight that everybody's watching and rooting against mostly because a lot of people like to hate against Duke. And then you got Wander just playing baseball in Florida, and you hear about it. You're like, oh yeah, this guy's amazing. He's the number one ranked prospect in all of baseball. But that's just you hearing it. When you are real time watching Zion dunk on players, you're like, that guy's the next LeBron. I'm gonna buy him right now or his first card whenever it comes out because I see that he's awesome. So because I can see that, you trust yourself more than some scout. You'll be like, I'm buying this guy because I can clearly see he's going to be a phenom. Whereas Wander, I just like read an article that says, oh man, this guy's amazing. I'm like, yeah, I believe you. I'm sure he's great, but I haven't seen it. So there's a little bit more doubt in buying his cards. I mean, his cards are still high because he's number one rated prospect, but there's something about watching your guy carry a team to the Elite Eight to finish that. But it's also not just Zion. You're watching. So say you're watching like, I don't know, Louisville, Wichita State or something, and you pick Louisville to go to the Final Four, and some kid from Wichita State's just raining threes or dropping 40 points on you. And
it kind of happened this last season with Ja Morant, right? He was a Wichita State guy, and a lot of people didn't really know who he was until March Madness, but he had a couple of really great games in March Madness and immediately got kind of put on the map for how he was scoring points. Yeah,
and if you knew about him, you picked him to the Sweet 16 or whatever, and you're like, he did it. Oh man, if this guy can succeed when I picked him, I'm gonna pick him again by buying his cards. Or if you're on the opposing side, you're like, that dude busted my bracket. He must be pretty good, because he messed up my bracket. And I know that my teams are usually good calls, and he must do something that I didn't know about. So maybe I should look at him. And so these players are generating emotions about them because people are watching them, and people are so they're clinging to their brackets. They're like, this guy or that guy, and it's just amazing the spotlight these guys have. And there's the draft, which has a bigger spotlight than the MLB draft for sure. And then they go right into the summer league. So basically, you have this journey with this player that you've been watching that you don't have with these minor leaguers because these games are not advertised. They're not on the TV. You can't just flip on CBS and go, yeah, there's my guy that I like. It's a way different path. So by the time they have reached the NBA, they have so much there's data that you can see, and also the fact that they're good because you watched them. And it's not the same with the minors. So there's, I guess, more of an opportunity to find these unknown guys because no one's watching them. Usually people will discover these guys, like casual fans or just collectors. They'll be like, wow, this guy has 9 home runs in his first 8 games in the majors. I see that now. But it's been building this whole time for the past couple of years, and no one knows because they're not having Gus Johnson call their games and freak out. Oh man, what a dunk! This guy's amazing. Yeah, this guy is amazing. I could see that. So it's just a way different path that I don't know. It just characterizes a key difference in the sports, and how the approach to collecting them is just something you have to think differently about.
Interesting point. But as you said, information wins, and especially in baseball, because the coverage of the prospects is not there at the same level as it is guys who are going into the NFL draft or baseball player or basketball players who are playing in the summer league. The opportunity is there that if you get the information and you can follow that obscure beat writer who is covering the Charlotte Stone Crabs, and figure out exactly, how things are going down there, then you perhaps have that opportunity to get in ahead of the competition and really use that information to your advantage.
You need to think about more than just what team they're on. You need to think about what's their age. Wander's still super young. What's the level of play he's at? He's at A+, I think. And so you need to think about other aspects of the player, because if you learn more about them, then it sets you even more apart from other guys. You have to think about like who's on their team. Like, I don't know who the Rays shortstop is off the top of my head. Wander's a shortstop, so he's got a clear path to be the Rays shortstop. But other guys might be blocked. And you need to think about all of these things. Is he going to get traded? Maybe he's blocked. Maybe he's a trade asset, not a future third baseman for this team. So there's just a lot of things to think about. And using the information to your advantage can help fill in some of the gaps of what you know about this player before you invest in them or anything.
Joel, I appreciate it. This was a really interesting conversation. Thanks for coming on Sports Card Investor. I think the audience got a lot of value out of it. Look forward to seeing more articles from you on our website and hopefully having you back on a future show.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Jeff. It was a lot of fun.
All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed my interview with Joel Ague. I thought we covered a lot of really, really good ground there. Remember to go to sportscardinvestor.com to read Joel's article, also to read Jaron Cox's article about 3 MLB cards he's buying right now, and go to the Discord chat server. The link is in the main menu bar, sportscardinvestor.com, Discord chat. Help us get to 1,000 members. Invite your friends to the server. Help us get to 1,000 members so that I can do a big giveaway in celebration of 1,000 members. Guys, thanks for watching the show. See you back in a few days for the next one. Thank you.